Hey guys, today I'm going to be reviewing Stella Glow. It is a strategy RPG for the 3DS, and it's basically similar to Fire Emblem and Final Fantasy Tactics, if you know those games. It's also from the creators of the Luminous Arc series, so you do know that they know what they're doing in terms of this genre. Basically, the premise of the story is, I'd almost say cliche, but you're a hero and you have to collect certain people for your team to basically save the world. There's not much else to it, but I'll get into why I think that it doesn't need anything else. The gameplay is, like I said, very similar to Fire Emblem Awakening if you've played that game. It's turn-based, but there's a bit of a twist. In Fire Emblem, you move your entire team in one turn, so if you have 6 characters rather, you move each 6 individually that turn, and then the enemy turn goes. However, in Stella Glow, it kind of changes it up a little bit, where your characters have innate speed values, and they go based on their speed, not based on teams. So you could have one of your characters start off the match, and then 3 enemies go, and then the rest of your team goes. So it changes up every single time you go in. So it's definitely very different than Fire Emblem, and since it's not team-based, it's very, very heavily focused on positioning, because if you get yourself caught out of position with one character, you might have to wait a while before you can move that character again, and your enemy might be moving twice before you can move. And that's especially true with one of the witches that you get, which are the magical beings in the game. She tends to not be very fast, so it's all about positioning this game. So speaking of witches, unlike a lot of fantasy RPGs, there isn't very much magic going on in this game. The only magic that is there is in the witches, and there's only 4 of them at some point in the game. So they're the only ones that have elemental affinities. They're the only ones that can do so-called magic. There's no mana. It's called SP. So everyone can use special moves that use that bar, but the witches are the ones that have like actual magic, and that's actually one of the biggest advantages to the strategy of this game is song magic. Song magic is there's 2 variants. There's one where the witches can do it on their own, and then there's another one where they require another character to kind of implement the magic for them. So the ones that they can do on their own takes about you have 2 separate magic bars. You've got the song magic bar and the SP bar. So both song magics obviously take the song magic bar. So those usually take 1 or 2 bars in order to use, and they're usually area of effect with buffs, debuffs, or just straight up damage. And I think all witches have both either a debuff and a buff, or damage, they either have a buff or a debuff as well as a damaging song. So that's something interesting. But the big song where you need the another character to help you with, that usually takes about 4 bars of song magic mana, I guess that's what you can call it, and they affect the entire field. So they have various ability. I'm just gonna go with what they do. 1 increases the crit chance for your entire team. 1 heals you every turn that witch has. The other 1 stops every enemy from being able to attack, as well as a defense drop. And then the last one that you get, that's not in order, but the last one you get is it adds a sleep to everyone on the field. So the crit one, honestly, I never found was useful at all. But the witch that had that song was very strong in general. The witches aren't very physically offensive. They're pretty defensively oriented. So I guess it was kind of a good trade-off to have a witch that could actually do a lot of damage instead of relying on standing in one place for 4 turns, singing a song, boosting the field. So like I said, it's really based on positioning. You don't want to put, when you use the ultimate song technique or whatever it's called, they can't move for I think it's 3 or 4 turns. So if you put yourself in the front lines and then you use the song, you're gonna be up a creek unless you're using the healing song. But yeah, it's really about positioning, but there is a few downsides, and honestly these are probably the only downsides in the game. enemies kind of take a while to go through their decisions. If you played Codename Steam, you'd understand how frustrating it is that it takes forever for an enemy to make their choice. But it's not nearly as long as that. It's just, it adds up to a lot of time, because not only do they take a while, but you can have animations on, where if you play Fire Emblem Awakening, it goes into like a little mini cutscene where it goes through the attacks, and while as beautiful as it is, it's very well animated, they're very, very satisfying animations, it takes a while. So maybe take that off if you're worried about the pacing of the battle. And the second, probably my biggest complaint about the game, is that you cannot rotate the map at all. So for the uninformed, when you play one of these games, you want to be able to see the map as best as you can. And the map control in this game is really awful. So you're given one angle, and it's usually like a sort of slanted bird's eye view, sort of angled towards the top. It's not exactly top down, and that's kind of an issue because you cannot see certain tiles in certain positions, and there's really nothing you can do to see those tiles. And it gets really frustrating because you can have a character and you're not sure if you can make it to somewhere, and you don't think that there's a spot in between you and the enemy, or if it is, it seems like it's impassable, and then you just get blindsided. And it's really unfortunate because when you want to travel around the map and like count how many spaces you need to go and kind of figure out where you can position yourself, to move around the map isn't very intuitive. It sort of doesn't show you the whole map. You have a zoom out, but it doesn't really look very good from the zoom out, and since you can't rotate the map, it kind of it gets a little bit hairy. But really, out of the whole game, that's really my only complaint, is that the matches themselves take really long, and not because, like, you know, they're really hard or they're really easy or whatever. It's because, you know, a lot of animations, a lot of decision making, and the fact that you can't rotate the map, that's just so bad for me. I hate that so much. But that's really it. Like I said, it's very focused on placement. If you're out of place, you will lose your character. And while there are really no punishments for losing your character, if you lose your healer, which I've done quite a lot because there's only really one main healer in the game, you could be in a really bad position. So it's definitely about placement. Now, as for the story and the visuals, oh man. So the story, like I said, it's pretty cliche. You're just traveling, trying to defeat the enemy. It's not that crazy, but oh man, they really took it up a notch with the voice acting, the character backstories. There's a little you basically, in Fire Emblem, how you can go off after missions and talk to people and kind of develop bonds and relationships, and there's like a marriage thing. So Stella Glow kind of takes that in a different direction. So there's no marriages, but you get, the whole game is basically a strategy game from start to end. Everything you do is incredibly strategic. You have two different options. You have not two different options. There's two different phases of the game: mission time and free time. So mission time, you can't really do anything other than buying armor and traveling the world map. Free time, you're in the main town, and there's a bunch of different things. You can talk to your teammates, which I'll get into in a little bit. You can explore the area, which sometimes gives you free items. Actually, I think it always gives you free items. You can do jobs for money, which I kind of found was a little useless because you usually have a lot of money during mission time, so it's not too bad. And then there's something called tuning a witch, and I'm not going to get too into that because it's kind of story related, but just know that it does take up your time, and it's another battle that you have to do in order to power up the witches. But basically, I found myself talking to my teammates every single time unless I needed to tune a witch. Because what talking to your teammates does is it builds a bond with them, and it gives them extra skills, which are so good. There's one skill that adds to one of your characters the fact that he's unaffected by any movement changes. So like, Snow slows you down incredibly, so you have this ability now where it doesn't affect you. So now you can travel the entire map very quickly. So those are really good, and those are the best ways to get new songs onto your witches, because you start off with, usually the song that the witches start off with that doesn't require the second player to initiate, they're usually like buffs. So, you know, one's a movement speed buff, one's a shield buff, but the one to get the damaging song, you have to talk with them, you have to tune them at some point. So you really have to plan your time out well, because it rotates the character. So if you talk to one character during your free time, and then you usually get three things to do during free time. The next time you go into the barracks to talk to someone, it's going to be a whole new set of characters. So you have to kind of plan out. You'll figure out who is at what time and how to work it to get to the person that you want to talk to. But and then usually it's not just one character to talk to. There's usually 3 or 4 people, so you have to make a decision. Do I want to talk to the witch? Do I want to talk to my my shield guy? What do I want to do? You know, who do I want to talk to? Who do I want to power up? So that is really cool. And there's a lot of talking in this game. It's actually mostly a visual novel with an accompanying game, if I were to describe it as something. But that's not a bad thing. A lot of the scenes, there's no cutscenes. Well, I mean, there are some cutscenes, very, very minimal on the cutscenes. But most of it is just a picture of the character talking, a text box, and then very, very good voice acting. It's very convincing. You know the characters. You wanna feel for the characters. They really develop the characters perfectly, and I really think that's the strongest point of the game, is that you're there for the characters, and by the end of the game you're feeling up a storm. And even though it's just a very basic premise, and they don't really develop it, you know, to some like extreme awesome story, like story of the year. The voice acting and the character development really brings it home and makes you feel like you're there, and it makes you want to know more. You want to know why this guy did what he did. You want to know why he's so angry. You just can't put it down, and that's what I love about it. So the length of it, right now I'm at the very, very end of the game, and I'm about 30 hours into it. So if you sit through every single scene with the voice acting on, kind of moving at its own pace, because it has the option to auto, and it'll go through it auto, you're gonna hit around 30 to 40 hours. Now, if you skip every scene and you turn off the animations in the game, you'll probably come in a little bit earlier than that, maybe 20 to 30 hours. But overall, it's pretty long. I didn't see any side quests to do. I could be wrong about that. There wasn't really anything that I saw. No characters to really talk to outside of your own teammates and the shopkeepers, but they don't really give you any quests. I guess the side quests that you can consider are the jobs, but you don't do anything. It's just like a small little cutscene. So no real side quests. And on the map there are like random battles that you can get into to level up, but you really don't need to level up. Since again, this game's all about positioning and strategy, you can be underleveled in all of these battles and still win because you have the better positioning than the computer. So the length is pretty long, especially if you sit through what I think is the strongest part of the game. So in conclusion, I suggest you get it. If you like strategy RPGs, this is definitely one of the best that I've played. You know, the map controls are really bad, and I think that's a huge downside, especially since you need to know your positioning. And the length of, you know, the story and the turns and the animations can be a put down, but overall it's not too bad. But again, the story itself is just fascinating. The characters are developed perfectly, and the use of the song magic really puts a whole new spin onto this and makes it really, like, you have to decide. If you bring all 4 witches, you have to decide, do I want this one in the back healing me, or do I want to make all the enemies not be able to attack me? So overall, I really like this game. I highly suggest it. And there is a demo out there if you want to give it a shot, and the demo is literally the beginning. That's the footage that I'm going to be using for this review. It's literally just the beginning of the game, so I'm not going to spoil it too much with the footage. But that's it. So thank you guys so much for watching. Please drop a like if you enjoyed this review, and next up, we're probably going to be reviewing Super Mystery Dungeon. So I hope to see you guys in the next episode. Peace.